In spite of all the perks offered in corporate America today, like free daycare and gyms on site, a lot of employees are not happy.
And help others embrace the great principles that America was founded on that are being destroyed not only on the governmental aspect, not only in the society and Hollywood and other places, but the very place where you work.
My guest today is Chris Banescu.
In other words, I am the VP of whatever. I am the CEO. I believe 2 + 2 = 5. You must now say, yes, Your Majesty, 2 + 2 = 5.
He's an entrepreneur, university professor, and author of Pursue Your Freedom and Happiness. Today he will discuss how large corporations are changing.
What you're doing is you're conditioning people to submit to tyranny.
And why he encourages people to embrace freedom and start their own companies with better values.
Surround yourself with great people of character. Hold yourself accountable to those people. Allow them to criticize you. Be humble.
I'm Siamak Korami. Welcome to California Insider.
Thank you. Good to be here.
We want to talk to you about the corporate culture. In California, we have a lot of good companies that grew to be really big, and they've contributed a lot to our economy. At the same time, we have a lot of companies that are doing a lot of interesting things for their employees, like offering massage chairs, you name it, they have. You are in the camp that you're seeing that some companies are slaving their team members or their employees. You want to, if I'm using the right word, what are your thoughts on this? Can you explain to us what you've observed over the years of studying the corporate America?
What I've seen, originally I thought maybe something was wrong with my very rigorous judgment of the environment I was observing. But I came to this country from a communist country, and I learned business in an American business school, and I went to law school, and I learned all the great principles of leadership and management and economics and finance. And a few years into working for a big company, something just didn't feel right. And originally I thought maybe I'm being too judgmental, like I said. Why are things happening this way? Why aren't these principles being practiced? And what ultimately developed was this idea that the capitalist free market principles that these businesses claimed they were practicing were not being practiced in a day-to-day way that the company was being run. And eventually, over many years of also teaching MBA students who shared hundreds of similar experiences, and these were MBA students, some as young as 20 and some as old as 55. Some were interns, some were managers, some were directors, and some were actually senior vice presidents of biomedical companies. And they reflected back to me that yes, indeed, what you observed as an employee and as a manager and an executive, lower level executive, is indeed that what they experience in their companies too. And what we all agreed that was happening is sort of a anti-capitalistic environment where instead of appreciating your most valuable resource, which is your employees, which create innovation, which create incredible opportunities for growth, who deliver value to your customers, you actually had a sort of, I call it neo-feudalism, a very tyrannical system where you have executives who are in charge of entire departments or entire companies who, instead of creating value, instead of helping employees to deliver value, to improve processes, to deliver great products, to deliver great services, abuse them and suck up all their productivity and their passion, and don't correspondingly treat them with the respect and proportionality and ethics. And the capitalistic model, the more you provide value, the more value gets delivered to you. And originally I thought it was just maybe my company. I wound up with a really bad apple. But then I changed a few more companies. Then I also consulted for other companies. And I realized, gosh, this is the status quo. The exact opposite of how these companies should be run is being practiced. And what made it even more kind of outrageous, a lot of the executives were rewarded for destroying the company from the inside. And maybe not necessarily destroying it in the short term. You would see a new company be extremely successful for a few years. But that was just the sort of the front side of what was happening. Internally, you had employees who were suffering, who were being overworked, who were being passed over for promotion, who were being abused ultimately. But you never saw that side. However, move 5 years into the future, that environment eventually collapsed. And then we notice this every few years, another scandal shows up. Another executive gets indicted. Another company goes bankrupt. And from that, I finally stumbled into Jim Collinson's Good to Great. And here was the final confirmation that what I was experiencing, what my students were seeing, was not the exception, was the rule. He looked at over 1,453 companies across decades, across industries, across different types of companies, and only found 11 companies that were great. In other words, only 11 companies ultimately practiced the capitalistic free market ethical leadership principles that these other companies claimed that they were doing. So from then, I finally reached the point that yes, we have companies in America that claim that they're capitalistic, that claim they care for their employees, claim they care for the customers, claim they want to deliver value. But the day-to-day way that they run their companies and organizations is feudalistic, is tyrannical in that sense.
So despite what you're saying, a lot of these companies are providing a lot of perks to be there. You know, like we have a lot of things that are new, especially in Silicon Valley, a lot of tech companies, biotech companies, they have a lot of benefits. So how do you see that not being aligned with the capitalistic values or not taking care of the employees? What did you see?
Well, there's multiple levels of that ultimately. Greed is very motivational, but so is ethical self-interest. So if you look at the results of these businesses, they will deliver results. And as we've seen,
financial results, right?
Financial results, and even good products. Initially, you have great employees who come up with innovation, who do give their all, who when they're rewarded reasonably well, will deliver these results. So you can have two different companies operating on the correct model of ethical self-interest, which means I should be proportionally, ethically, fairly rewarded for the value that I bring to a company. Nothing wrong with that. But then you have another company operating on the greed, as you mentioned, where individuals operate on the I will do anything I can to enrich myself. I will get results regardless of what I do. And in the front side of that, the products and services that we see and use and experience, the customer won't see it. And unless the press looks behind the curtain, and unless a former employee or a current employee blows the whistles about what's really going on inside the organization, we're not going to see it. So the ultimate results are the same in the short term. And then it does help our free market economy because it does deliver products and services. The problem happens 10 years, 20 years down the road. What happens after the initial success?
So what's an example of that? So when an employee is working in one of these companies, what does it look like?
Well, I think the window dressing version of it would be if you come in as an official visitor, you won't see anything different initially. You need to spend time with these employees. You need to be able to kind of hear the story behind the story when the boss is not around to get the real story of this. I have a personal example. I was working for Universal, and I had the opportunity to work for Homestore.com. At the time, was the largest real estate portal on the web. They had a deal with Realtor.com, which was a very special deal to allow them to have every single listing that Realtor.com had being displayed on the website. And in the initial interviews, meeting the executives, meeting the people who were working there, it looked like a great opportunity, wonderful entrepreneurial company, incredible innovation, the sky's the limit, I'll be given freedom to innovate, I will be free freedom to use my gifts to the best of my ability. I was on cloud 9. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. And I knew something was wrong only on the first day, and I'm walking down the hall, trying to reach my office, and a gentleman said, "Good morning, who are you?" I looked at him, I'm Chris Banescu. I'm Director of Web Development for Homestar.com. Started working today. He looked at me, he patted me on the back, and he said, "I'm so sorry, you have to work here," and walked away. And I sat there for a few minutes trying to figure out what just happened here exactly. And within a few days, I finally understood that what I gotten myself into is a company was run by semi-sociopaths. Because I was only focused on the whining and dining sort of window dressing aspect, I had missed the real story. Had I spent maybe a couple of days unofficially getting to meet other people there, getting to see how people work, observing what I call the nonverbal communication of individuals, I might have gotten some hints that what's being presented as a wonderful opportunity is actually a very dysfunctional organization that eventually turned toxic and eventually destroyed $1.6 billion worth of investor value, with 11 executives prosecuted by the federal government for fraud and financial shenanigans, et cetera. Yeah.
Based on the way I was trained in business was, I was trained by some executives coming from some of the top consulting companies. And what I was told is that you just need to make as much money as possible. And as long as it's legal, then you donate to charity. And then everything is okay. Everything is good. This is the way we should be running a company. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the executives are influenced by this kind of thinking in corporate America now?
Absolutely. And this is the problem. I can't point to any book on management, leadership, economics, entrepreneurship, or any MBA program that teaches these executives that the way you get ahead, the way you create value is to step on everybody, do anything possible to make a buck. So what is going on? For some reason, a little bit of power, a little bit of authority, and a whole lot of financial rewards overrides common sense, overrides the education of these executives. And if there is no check and balance mechanism, and they acquire more power and control, eventually you wind up with the Michael Douglas, greed is good. And God forbid they associate with other executives who have a similar mindset, and there is nobody there to remind them these are human beings that have minds, hearts, souls. What you're doing, yes, it's making you a lot of money, but what's going to happen 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? So what you have is a generation of executives believing that that's how you do business. It's not business if you don't do this, as a matter of fact. So this gets perpetuated, and then eventually several iterations of this, the good people that work there are not going to put up with being abused and treated like objects, so they leave. And here comes a brand new employee with my business degree from NYU. You walk into these organizations expecting to see the wonderful things that you got taught, expecting to be rewarded for your hard work, expecting to be treated with decency. And that's not what happens. And then on top of that, we have, I call it the caste system, where the only people being rewarded capitalistically, per se, are the executives. They have salary, bonus structure, stock options, profit participation, all these layers that are only reserved for them. And it doesn't percolate in any way, shape, or form to anybody else in the organization. Maybe a senior director would get bonuses. It took me years at Universal to reach the preferred status of a semi-executive to be able to get a bonus. So that kind of environment creates the narrative to the individuals that they're special. That's because of them that the company exists, not the little people, not these unwashed masses to walk in. And that's a very kind of top-down tyrannical system, more like socialism or feudalism. Had absolutely nothing to do with free market capitalism. Free market capitalism says anybody from the janitor all to the CEO if they create value, if they're disciplined, if they're productive, if they're responsible, if they help the long-term profitability and value of a business, should be ethically, proportionally, fairly rewarded. And yet you find that in a very tiny minority of companies.
A lot of young people, when they get into these companies and they wanna make it in these companies. On the other end, these companies, they try to manipulate the environment for them. And they try to control how these individuals think, how they work, what they say, what they not say. What are your thoughts on this?
It's happening more and more. I never thought I would see the level of soft totalitarianism, if you like to call it that, where executives believe that their personal opinion should be shared by everyone in the company. We've had situations recently where book publishing companies, the employees got offended that the particular author that was published, they don't agree with their point of view. So rather than say, well, you know, we can agree to disagree, the employees and the executives demanded that that particular book not be published. Or you have situations where you have HR enforcing speech codes. In America? And it has absolutely nothing to do with what the company does. They take the social justice aspect, and because they feel strongly about it, they kind of bring it into the organization, and they don't realize that maybe half of the employees don't believe that. But you're not allowed to disagree. And they don't do it directly. They're very smart. I didn't touch on one of the aspects. What I've also discovered, there are sociopaths hiding in many of these organizations. Dr. Martha Stout wrote a book, The Sociopath Next Door, where her study revealed that 4% of the population worldwide, especially in America, are sociopaths. They have no conscience. Where you have these type of individuals in companies in charge of HR or any other department, they want to control everybody that works there, including your speech. And now we have more and more situations where you post something wrong on Facebook that some executive disagrees with. It has nothing to do with your job. It has absolutely nothing to do with your qualifications or the functional area of your company. You get demoted, you get called into the principal's office and behind the sheds scenario, or you get fired. Soft totalitarianism. And again, it's back to what I mentioned earlier. This should not be happening. You reap the benefit of capitalism. You reach this level of influence and power. As a matter of fact, you should be more cognizant of your power and influence. I don't want anybody to agree with me. I'm not going to tell my employees to do this. This is unseemly. But then, of course, that requires character. So now you have a situation more and more where conservatives are kind of an endangered species. It's bad enough in academia. Maybe they said even business programs in some university have less than 10% conservative faculty. But now you have corporations where disagreeing from the party line on any issue, climate change, transgender this, transgender that, America is bad, capitalism is horrible, socialism is fantastic, we should all embrace communism. You as an employee have to be very careful. Watch what you say, and God forbid you express your honest personal opinion. It is not tolerated. And what's really diabolical about this, and I'm not using that term lightly, it is ultimately diabolical. What you're doing is you're conditioning people to submit to tyranny, unjust tyranny. You're conditioning individuals to look at a blue sky and say it's red. Or observe somebody.
Because the CEO or the executives are saying, we like to have you say it's red. Yeah.
Exactly right. Silence in some places is no longer tolerated. In other words, I am the VP of whatever. I am the CEO. I believe, and I'm paraphrasing, fill in your favorite issue, 2 + 2 = 5. You as an employee or as someone reporting to this individual, you remaining silent is a sign of disrespect or a sign of resistance. You must now say, yes, Your Majesty, 2 + 2 = 5. reminds me of the old communist, I lived in a communist country, so you would have these symposiums where the glories of communism would be touted. And Ceausescu, in our case from Romania, would come up to the podium and blab some nonsense, just lie after lie after lie. And Stalin did this too. But at a certain moment, everyone was prompted to applaud and stand up, and the Securitate, the Romanian version of the KGB, would be looking to see who's not applauding, who's not standing up, and even then, are you applauding vigorously enough? So and I've seen this, not this model, but I've been in meetings where the executive or another manager says just something completely absurd. But because that employee is the golden boy or the golden woman who's a favorite to the executive or who's an incredible salesperson, and they got the job done, as you mentioned earlier, regardless of how many people she stepped over, no matter how many messes they left behind, no matter how much stuff they've destroyed, that individual has carte blanche to say and do anything. And the rest of us peons must either zip it or nod our heads and applaud and say, "Oh, Johnny, that was a fantastic idea. Of course, let's run with it." Lest you think I'm crazy, I'll give you a great example. Yahoo hired Marissa Mayer from Google because they thought she was a fantastic executive. And this woman, the first thing she decided to do, mind you, this is an e-commerce company. She didn't like people working from home. So one of her first directives, she told everyone, starting Monday, fill in the date, nobody can work from home anymore. Imagine being an employee who works at Yahoo. The irony of this particular initiative, Marissa Mayer was pregnant. She built a nursery right next to her office. Something wrong with that? She brought her home in the office. And she told the rest of her employees, you can no longer work from home. Just massive hypocrisy. Yet, do you think any employee dared say peep to Marissa Mayer? No. Ultimately, the consequence of that, years later, she was not able to turn Yahoo around. She destroyed the company from the inside also, demotivated employees. I think within a year of her tenure as CEO, a third of the employees quit. And ultimately, the company failed. The problem with that scenario, unfortunately, when she left with a golden parachute of $23 million. And people say that's capitalism. Wait, I run a company, I destroy it, I lose money, I lose value, and I move it to the near bankruptcy, and I am rewarded for doing that? No, I'm sorry, that is not capitalism. So that's the other aspect of not only they don't run the organizations correctly, not only do they abuse employees, they also destroy value. They destroy the principles that are supposed to they be practicing and then get a reward for it. And then ultimately they blame capitalism for this. No, it's your lack of character, it's your sociopathy, it's your incompetence, it's your greed. Those are the things that caused this company to collapse, not capitalism. Capitalism is value and morally neutral. It's like I compare it to gravity. You jump out of an airplane and ignore gravity without a parachute, there will be consequences. You will become pancake. It's not gravity's fault. It is your failure to acknowledge gravity. Same thing with these executives. The reason the company fails is not because it practiced capitalism and free market principles too well, is because they did not practice ethical free market capitalism. But then they still blame capitalism for it. No, it was not. It was not what caused this. So the final point, great question. Again, excellent question. The poor employees who work in these organizations, when they see how they're being treated, when they see how they carry the burden of the lazy employees, the favorite employees, the employees that destroy the company, but they support the bottom line for the next quarter, never mind what the consequences are a few years down the road. When they see how these tyrannical executives abuse them, and then they hear, well, this is capitalism. Those poor employees look at this and say, gosh, if this is capitalism, give me some communism, give me some socialism. So they reject the only true value of, the only true engine of value creation, the only thing that can actually bring them freedom, that can improve their lives, and embrace something 100 times worse.
So are you saying that these companies are practicing something like socialism or communism under the name of capitalism?
Yes, absolutely right. And getting rewarded for it. This is, that's why I mentioned diabolical. If you had told me when I escaped communism from Romania 40 years ago that this is how American corporations will be run, I would look at you and say, you must have escaped some insane asylum. This is America. This cannot happen in America. And here I am 40 years later telling you that's exactly what's happening in so many companies. And it's getting worse. Now we're having companies like Facebook and Twitter and Google, they're not just happy to destroy their own employees and make them comply with their political views. They're trying to influence elections. They're trying to silence Americans. They're trying to destroy your company. We'll delist you off of Facebook. You have a company, you have 50,000 customers, we'll just wipe you off the map. Google will remove you from your search results. And that is, again, evil. Having individuals who use the engine of value creation to enrich themselves, almost to the point of, what's that term? You're filthy rich. And then use every one of that value, all that money, all that power, to crush the freedom and opportunity for everybody else. And then call that capitalism. No, I'm sorry, that is feudalism. That is communism. I lived it, I've seen it, not just me, millions of others. You are slapping a label on that bull, but it's actually a cow. And I don't care that, you put the horns, that is communism. I don't care what you call it. Unfortunately, I never learned this in school. I never learned this in my graduate school. I never learned it from the companies that I worked at. Nobody mentored me that this is what I should be expecting. So that's why I have this passion to let people know the truth, to be able to make the right choices and reward and help others embrace the great principles that America was founded on, that are being destroyed not only on the governmental aspect, not only in the society and Hollywood and other places, but the very place where you work. The individuals who claim to uphold free market economics are using all their power to crush it and destroy it, and then negatively influence everyone to think that this is capitalism. So yes, give me socialism, embrace me, embrace it. And this is why the new generation, as a matter of fact, I think the latest poll, over 50% have no problem with communism, have no problem with socialism.
Now, what is our way out of this?
Great question. People of character who also have courage. Of course, courage is a subset of character. Usually people of character are courageous. Looking through, trying to find a common thread to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, like you asked, how do we get ourselves in this mess and how do we get ourselves out? I've realized that if a person doesn't have character, nothing else matters. It doesn't matter what background you're from. It doesn't matter what kind of education you have. It doesn't matter your religious beliefs. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. So to get ourselves out of this mess, have people of character either slowly change their organization if they are high enough to effectuate change. I write in my book, if you are trying to make changes, but you wind up getting fired, and you have a family to feed, and you have a mortgage to pay, you shouldn't be doing that. Of course, I did that. I made the mistake because they won't listen. As a matter of fact,
might have not been a mistake because
you have to pay your dues to find your freedom, and that's the thing. Ultimately, the second part of your answer is you need people of character to either transform the organizations, bring them back to fundamental principles, restore the things that this engine of value creation were designed to do, also eliminate the sociopaths, the incompetent, the greedy, the hypocrites, the people who destroy the organization from the inside. And then those companies now can flourish and attract other employees to come in, and they benefit not only economically, but ultimately spiritually. You spend more time at work than you do with your own family. So when you live in an environment you're abused and belittled and insulted and made to live in constant fear, it's not pleasant. So try to transform if you can. At a minimum, stop supporting value for value. Do your job for what you get paid, but then don't go any further. But ultimately, the greatest way that you can change this is to leave these dysfunctional organizations and create your own. And this is where America is such a beautiful place. It allows individuals who have the courage and the ability to start new enterprises to build it right from the start, and then maintain that culture of character and courage and integrity, and build those principles from the ground up, and ensure that for the remainder of the life of this company, this enterprise, those principles are the foundational principles that allow this business to exist, and everyone that comes in either abides by that or they're either shown the door. That's how we can probably change it. Unfortunately, that takes decades, and many of us want instant results. So it's going to be difficult, but that's ultimately, I hope, the only way we're going to change this.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.